Hello and welcome to the Flag to Flag Motorsport Podcast. My name is Charlie Roscoe and I'm joined by one of my two co-hosts, Willie. How are you, mate?
Good.
Now, look, we've only really got one form of motorsport to talk about, as it was a pretty quiet weekend on the motorsport front. But the MotoGP was on from the Saxon Ring, and we had a wet qualifying session and a bit of a, well, I wouldn't say a completely upside down grid, because Marquez was, of course, in pole. But it was a bit of a different qualifying result from the norm this season, anyway.
It was. Yeah, as you said, certainly not from Marquez. He got his 8th pole in a row at the Saxon Ring. He's the king of the ring. He is.
King of the Saxon Ring.
While he's been going there, he's undefeated.
Oh, yeah, he's 8 straight. He's won 8 consecutive races on 8 occasions, or on the last 8 occasions he's been there. So there's no stopping the guy. It didn't matter how topsy-turvy the qualifying was. He still put it on pole with the quickest time. But Petrucci, still up there again. He's really making a bit of a thing of it. The Ducati of his is working very, very well. And yeah, he's managed to put it second on the grid, which was fantastic for him. Of course, we had Danny Pedrosa in third. I don't know if that's unusual per se, although he doesn't usually qualify that well, does he?
No, not really. A lot of the time, because he's such a small rider, he can't get the heat in the front tyre. Sort of like the other guys, doesn't have the weight to, I suppose, help heat the tyre up and stuff like that. But
he makes up for it with that weight from the getting off the line, because, of course, he's usually there or thereabouts by turn 1, and that is generally because his starts, being that he weighs about 16 kilos, his starts are phenomenal, so he's normally there. It feels like he qualifies well, but he actually doesn't usually, so I guess third's a little bit out of the usual. But then, of course, we got Cal Crutchlow. I think it was Folger in 5th, Lorenzo in 6th, Pol Espargaro, Aleix Espargaro, and then finally you get down to some of the bigger names of the season, like Valentino Rossi in 9th, Dovizioso in 10th, and Viñales in 11th. But it was good to see the Espargaro boys up there in 7th and 8th, wasn't it?
Oh, for sure. The Yamahas are struggling in the wet, so that's why it's pushed Rossi and Viñales back. Something to do with this 2017 chassis that is not quite good in the wet. It doesn't.
No, well, even Zarco was back in 19th. Like, I know he's a rookie, of course, but still, we haven't seen Zarco that far back. Folger, of course, was 5th, but you kind of have to ignore him because it was his home race. And I think you're always going to outperform probably your bike and yourself and the norm at your home race. That seems to be what happens. So 5th is great, don't get me wrong, I'm not taking anything away from 5th, but yeah, you're right, the Yamahas, clearly they've done something that heavily affects handling in the wet.
Yeah, well, I think that's why we see the Tech 3 boys, because they are on a 2016 chassis. So that's...
yeah, okay, yeah, of course.
Yeah, so that's probably why they're quite competitive this year, because last year's Yamaha obviously was a pretty good package.
Yeah, well, not a bad one.
Yeah, but I do like the mix-up. It's good for KTM. That's their best result.
Well, yeah, KTM and Aprilia, to see them in 7th and 8th, it's fantastic. The two new manufacturers, I really feel like not only are they getting the hang of it already, but they've actually almost overtaken Suzuki at this point.
Yeah, Suzuki aren't really anywhere at the moment, and I think Iannoni's ride is starting to come under pressure. I did hear a little bit of talk on the weekend. They were saying about like Jack Miller. He's sort of looking around a little bit, or being contacted, whichever you...
Yeah, well, apparently he's been in talks with Suzuki for quite a while now, they've been saying.
Yeah, and Suzuki are also apparently looking at, like, to help development and to push them forward, because obviously they want to be serious contenders about having satellite bikes. And the Mark VDS team may be, in fact, taking on Suzuki's next year.
Yeah, that's it. I did hear that. And look, I don't think it'll be a bad thing. I'm not sure that Suzuki, as a secondary bike, is necessarily going to be competitive. It's an interesting move. I would have thought it'd be something perhaps one of the really back-running teams would have considered. But I kind of feel like... look, the Mark VDS bike, it's arguable if it's good or not. Because every race you've got Jack Miller coming... so far this year he's actually been going really well, but he's still only been getting about that... So somewhere between 8th and 12th seems to be sort of finishing position. Let's say 10th as an average. I don't know what it is, but we'll say 10th. And then you've got his teammate way up the back coming, 2nd, 3rd last, 4th last, things like that. So it's very hard to get a gauge of where it is, because I don't think Rabat has taken to the MotoGP bike very well at all.
No.
So, yeah, it is difficult to see, but I'm not sure if switching to Suzuki would be a wise move for the Mark VDS team, simply because Suzuki is struggling a bit this year, albeit they do have Rins, who's brand new. And they've got, they actually had Sylvan Gintoli as well come in, who, of course, used to ride in the Superbikes. He was in for this race as well.
Yeah.
But generally, of course, it's just Iannone and he's not been going that well either, or Rins. So
yeah. Well, I thought this year was going to be a lot different with the Suzuki for Iannone. I think it really showcases the talent that Vinales is to the results that he got last year, unless there's been updates, say a little bit like what the Yamaha has done, and not quite gelled as well as what they'd hoped. But
that or just not made a progressive step, because obviously you'd expect the factory bikes in front of them, and a lot of the bikes in front of them would have taken steps forward, but they haven't necessarily done that. And Iannone, it's really hard, because I honestly, he had a huge amount of speed on the Ducati, but unfortunately he just crashed too much, and I think they dropped him because it crashed too much. Turns out to be a fantastic decision, because Costavizioso, he was leading the World Championship last round, he's still third by a few points, by a handful of points. So, but I'll get to the championship in a sec. But yeah, nonetheless, it's I don't know what's going on for Suzuki, but I'm not necessarily convinced that a satellite Suzuki is going to be a particularly competitive bike. I
think it's just for development, so they can keep their factory bikes going forward, going forward as they are, and try and probably use the others as a bit more development. Things like that, even test days, probably a little bit like what Honda used Cal Crutchlow for a bit, I guess. Yeah,
absolutely. And look, I can see how there's a lot of benefit for Suzuki. I just don't know that there would be a lot of benefit for the Mark VDS team. But we'll see how we go. Nothing's been confirmed on that front. And obviously, I think to have a second Suzuki team in there would be good, because at the moment, most of the satellite teams are taking the Ducati, because it's probably one of the best bikes out there. In terms of factory or non-factory bikes, it's about the best you want. And that bike of Petrucci's is fantastic. That Ducati, and there is actually, talking about Jack Miller and rumoured links to other teams, Ducati apparently has been in talks with him, but whether or not that's on a factory bike, I don't know. Potentially not, because you're not going to kick Dovizioso out, and I'd imagine they've signed Lorenzo for at least 2 years.
Yeah, well, I reckon if a factory ride popped up, I reckon they'd probably nearly stick Petrucci in there.
I agree. They'd probably put him before Jack Miller.
Yeah, but in saying that, I'm pretty sure Petrucci's bike this year is actually a factory bike. It's this year's current spec. So he may not get the little updates and bits and pieces throughout the year, but it is this year's bike.
Yeah, and I mean, look, that'd be a great bike, I think, for Jack to jump onto. I think the Ducati would suit his riding style as well. I don't think the Honda does. Yeah, but that Ducati, I really feel like it would actually go quite well. So it wouldn't be a bad move for Jack Miller to do that.
It would be nice to see another Australian be in a satellite Honda team for a little bit and then make a step to a factory Ducati. That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. It's testament to days gone past, I suppose. But But look, nonetheless, it was a fairly decent race. Obviously, some good comeback throughs for the final points paying position. Marquez, of course, as we discussed, disappeared. Great of Jonas Folger on a non-factory Yamaha.
Yeah, I couldn't believe how he hung in. He did a fantastic job, and I think they were both. Folger made a couple little mistakes, but like Marquez, I don't know whether he even got into the 128s. I think it was 127s they were doing. Was 120? No, it might have been 129s. Whatever it was, that he was consistent the whole race. No, it was 127s. He was consistent in that the whole race, and the other guys were, quite a way behind. They just
Danny Pedrosa,
they just couldn't match the pace.
Finished 11.5 seconds behind Marquez. And look, the scoreboard shows Jonas Folger 3.3 seconds down, but let's be honest, that all happened in the last 2 laps.
It did.
It looked like Folger just cooked his back tyre. He was spinning it up out of all the corners. So he cooked his tyres, fair enough. He's not even on a factory bike. Like, you're only going to do so much with someone like Marc Marquez, who's so dominating at the Sachsenring. So for Pedrosa to be 11.5 seconds back, then Vinales 14.2 seconds back from the leader in 4th place. I mean, that's a huge gap in MotoGP terms.
Yep.
So look, but good on Folger. He stuck with it the whole time. Disappointing for him that he didn't win. But what it was good for is the championship, which I briefly mentioned before. And you now have a situation where the championship's flipped around again. So Dovizioso was on top last round. Viñales was on top the round before that. So for the third consecutive race, we have a new championship leader. And it is Marc Marquez, after a disgusting start to the year, a couple of DNFs, and he is now going into the month off, because of course we've got a month off now. Yep. He's now going into the summer break, leading the championship.
Yeah, well, I hope this isn't of things to come. The fact that he's sorting himself out, being consistent, getting race wins, all those sorts of things. I hope he doesn't start to run away now. Like, this isn't signs of things to come. But you got.
Well, I think it's too early to call that. I mean, he's only just taken the lead, and it's close. That's the important thing. It doesn't matter who stacks on top until the last couple of rounds, but. Valentino Rossi is now down in 4th position in the championship, but he's only 10 points off the leader. So the top 4 people are separated by a total of 10 points. And in fact, Viñales is only 5 points off Marquez, and Dovizioso is just 1 point behind him. And then you've got Rossi 4 points behind him. So it's fantastic. Even Danny Pedrosa,
I was about to say that.
Rule him out. He's now more than a race win. But it's 26 points. So even that is not out of the realm of possibility. So we've kind of got a 5-way championship in the midpoint of the season. When was the last time we had 4 or even 5 riders this close to leading the championship?
Oh, not for a long time. It's quite exciting, and with other, I suppose, new riders, it's a little bit disappointing that Lorenzo hasn't been able to really make much of a transition to the Ducati yet. I really think his riding style just does not suit it. Because he is a normal championship contender that isn't there. I didn't like in the race how they said it was only 3 laps in. He did go with the soft combination, which was pretty crazy, really. And early on, he started 6th, and I think he jumped up to 3rd. But then it was only 3 laps in, and he dropped back. And they said, maybe he's gone backwards. Maybe he's already cooked his tyres. I thought, it's 3 laps into the race.
There's no way. Look, honestly, I think that's the commentators being polite to him, because this further goes to prove what I was saying. I think it was last race I was talking about this on the podcast, that as soon as Lorenzo gets duffed up by someone, the elbows come out and someone pushes him out and overtakes him, he just drops his bundle. Mentally, it breaks him, and it takes him a few laps to recover. And when he did it, I think he was in 3rd place, and I can't remember who it was that pushed past him. It might have actually been, in the end, Folger. I can't remember.
Yeah, it probably was.
But I think it was Folger pushed past him.
Because the Honda boys are in front.
That's right, yeah. And as Folger pushed past, I actually commented at the time. I said, well, that'll upset Lorenzo. He'll be 8th within 3 laps. And sure enough, within, I think it was about 3 laps, he was back in 8th position. He just... As soon as he got duffed up after 3 laps, there's no way that's a tyre thing. I'm sorry, you can't convince me, unless I can see some data to prove that after 3 laps, his tyres went off. And if they did, then Pirelli needs to have a good long hard look at themselves if tyres are going off after 3 laps on a cold track.
It can't be, especially when some of the riders set their fastest lap of the race towards the end of the race. Like, I think Rossi did that last race, and Marquez did it this race.
Yeah.
So...
Yeah, no, it's not a thing, and look, Lorenzo I think is mentally a bit, he's not solid mentally at the moment. He's just a bit all over the show. It's going to take him a while to recover. And speaking of the championship and relating it back to Lorenzo, he's actually only 9th overall.
Yeah,
he's 1 point behind Petrucci, who's on a satellite Ducati. I'll point out.
Yep,
he's a long way off Dovizioso, to the tune of half of his points. Yep. Are we talking 65 points to 123 points? And he is, in fact, behind both of the satellite Yamaha boys in Zarco and Folger.
Yeah, his points aren't even quite... They're not quite 3 race wins. So if... Whoever it was, if there was someone to win the first 3 races of the year, they would have already accumulated more points than what Lorenzo has up to this point.
Yeah. Yeah, so, I mean, it's probably a bold call to make it at this point, but I'd say Lorenzo's already out of the championship for the year. So I think for him, he just needs to focus on getting good results, trying to recover some that mental edge, some confidence. He's obviously down on confidence, and
use it as a bit of a test season, so to speak.
Yeah, he just needs
development season.
that's it. Work hard, try different things. Sometimes it might mean he comes stone motherless last if whatever he tries doesn't work. But you never know, he might find that magical thing that gets him the win. Because at the moment, I can't see any way for him to sort of come through and start winning races. I just can't see that happening at the moment. So.
I'm sure with the fact that originally they had him as the number one rider, I'm sure they're still throwing money into his bike, his setup, the chassis, all those sorts of things to try and get something that he's comfortable with. Because I'm sure they would like to see him at the top, since that they pulled him in and paid him so much more money. But good on Dovey, good on the underdog. Look at him go.
Absolutely doing well. And as I say, it is a tight championship at the top, with the top four being within 10 points, and Danny Pedrosa snapping at the heels as well. So, look, that is it for the MotoGP for the next month. They've got 4 weeks off now. It is a summer break, and we're not going to be talking about it for a little while either. So, obviously, probably not until that race. But that is going to wrap it up for today. So, thanks to everyone who has joined us for this episode. Hopefully, you have liked it. Feel free to check out our other podcasts on the YouTube channel or by visiting our website www.flagtoflag.ml. Of course, if you enjoyed this episode, please do leave it a like. It means a lot. Share it with your friends. And last but not least, thanks for joining me, Willie.
No worries at all.
All right, well, we look forward to talking to you all next time. Bye for now.